Welcome. Today's meeting on May 28th is with the Sioux Falls City Council and the Minnehaha County Commission. I'd like you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could have a motion to approve the agenda from the county side, please.
So moved.
Second, Hyper.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And from the city?
So move, Entman.
Second, Anderson.
Roll call vote, I believe.
Councilmembers Aguilar, Anderson.
Yes.
Entenmann.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jamison.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers. And for the record, Councilmembers Aguilar and Staggers are absent.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a briefing and update of the museum and the archive facility project. Diane Metley. Welcome, Diane.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Metley. I'm chair of the Museum Storage Collections Committee, and we are here today to give you a very brief presentation on the findings of the committee, and then we'll turn it over to you for questions. The members of my committee are Jeff Barth, Dick Kelly, Bob Litz, Julie Risty, Michelle Erpenbach, Kermit Staggers, Bill Hoskins, Tracy Turback, Lori Hogsted, Jim David, and Dave Bixler. We had a nice mix from both entities. The recommendation of our committee is to build a structure which addresses museum needs only. It does not recommend joint government record storage, as both the city and the county are developing separate plans on this issue. Second, our proposed floor plan. The total square feet is just over 29,000 square feet. Construction costs are just under $4 million, or $132.61 per square foot. Further recommendations. The committee further recommends that the city and the county share jointly in operation costs for the new museum storage facility under the same agreement set in 1974 when the museums were created. And if either the county or the city decides to build additional storage, they would be independently responsible for any costs associated with that. Current storage. This is just to give you a little update on storage issues as they exist today. And this involves the Courthouse Museum, the Pettigrew, and Oscar Storage, which is cold storage. Total square footage is just over 15,000 square feet. The staff has a workroom or workrooms of just over 1,000 square feet. A structural engineer survey states that 55% of the current storage space should not be used for storage. And 67% of the current storage space has no environmental controls. Collection growth. Through donations and deaccessioning, the collection on average increases about 30 square feet per year. Some of our safety concerns. We've had 2 structural reports done. One was done in 2004, and these reports involve the attic storage, which is above the old courtroom. The first one was done in 2004, and the bottom line is that it does not meet code. The code defines light storage as 125 pounds per square foot, and the existing attic can hold only 40 pounds per square foot. The second survey was done in 2010, and they concurred with the 2004 recommendation that it does not meet code. And we need to understand that in the old courtroom is where most of the public events are held. We have wedding receptions, we have luncheons, we have banquets, we have dances. And above these people is 3,000 feet of storage that doesn't meet code. So, in 2012, the attendance at the Old Courthouse Museum was 40,000 people. And over the last 5 years, annual attendance growth has been almost 3% per year. Lease versus build. We're going to, my committee did consider leasing. We looked at a couple of places to lease, and we thought we'd do a little comparison for you. For the build, at the proposed site, 67% of the site would be utilized for collection storage. Current racking and shelving would be reused at the new facility. We already have 25 acres donated as a site located at 54th and Westport. And we've already had site preparation done at an estimated cost of $1.75 million. The dirt was donated and was used to build the city junior football fields. Now, some facts about the leasing. If you can find commercial property with air conditioning and heat, they are leasing for about between $8 and $11 per square foot, with an annual cost of $230,000 to $320,000 per year. Current racking and shelving could be reused at that leased facility. The problem is available of suitable property for the museum's needs. Leased space is generally warehouse space, and additional costs would need to be incurred to meet the environmental standards. Leasing would eliminate the county's ability to expand the site for record retention. And there would be loss of the significant donation. The land would sit unused. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, I have the entire committee, and I have my board members and staff here. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks, Diane. Are there any questions for Diane before she goes too far? Mr. Ammon?
Thank you. Diane, I just had a question. The storage that this is going to be used, you said is for museum storage. I think originally when I saw a presentation, first year that I was on the council, I believe it showed it as public record storage for the city as well as court storage for the court system. So that is now eliminated from this proposal, is that correct?
That's correct. Our recommendation is just simply for the museum needs and not for city or county storage, record storage.
Okay. I do. One more, if I
Sure,
might.
certainly.
One more. I know we have 25 acres of land out there. I know you have that, and I'm very familiar with the site because I overlook it myself. But there was some suggestion in the past that I'd heard that the facility that you're recommending, including parking, would take 5 to 7 acres of land in that area, and then it was recommended in order to, there was talk, excuse me, not a recommendation, that maybe we try to sell a balance of that land to start the fund that's going to be needed to build this facility. Is there any more thought about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. We would probably use 5 acres for the facility and parking, and I don't think we would sell all of it. Where we would just sell 7 to 10 acres, I think, to fund our portion of the cost of the new facility.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Erpenbach.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to clarify. I did serve with Diane on this group, and I would remind this organization here that this collections committee was created by this group, that we picked people from both the city and the county, and then we chose Diane to be the chair because she has some experience with it and because she's fairly unbiased when it comes to looking at these sorts of things. In response to one of the questions that Councilor Entman had was that idea that we're sharing the cost, the city, the county, and private dollars. And so the bulk of the private dollars would come from that land sale. It's my understanding that the county is already in the process of having that land appraised and is getting it ready to sell. The museum board is at a point where this needs to happen as quickly as possible. I mean, we're talking about code issues, and we're talking about the safety of the public at this point, and it's dragged on long enough. And then the other thing that I would remind this group is that that idea that
that we share these costs anyway, that this is going to happen in terms of sharing it all, you know, the operations and all those sorts of things. This really is the best plan in terms of taking care of the museum properties, the collection and those things. This is the best, most affordable plan. And I would remind the City Council especially that we have approved a scanning project, wherein we're putting almost all of our records onto electronic media, and it won't take near the space that we originally talked about. So that became one of the first things we talked about in this work committee was the city does not require that, and therefore our costs have gone down dramatically from that, because we all saw that same presentation early on. It was a very expensive process, a very expensive idea. It's come way down from that, and this is really doable, really practical. I'd encourage us to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Diane? Gerald, any other comments? Mr. Rolfing?
What are the estimated costs of operation on this on an annual basis? Did you come into that?
I am going to turn that over to Mr. Hoskins.
Well, the figures aren't quite up to date. As part of this process, we've been sizing back, reducing some of the space for record storage that had initially been planned. But we're looking at a cost for utilities, things like that, of $42,000 a year.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions for Bill? Commissioner Heiberger?
Bill, I'm wondering what you're looking at for staffing this place.
Well, our collections is managed by 3 full-time staff today. They really need to be where the collection is stored. We also have as many as 18 volunteers through the course of the year that work with the collections management. And so we're really hoping to get by without increasing the staff, especially initially. There may be a need to look at part-time, and that's what we looked at, was expanding some of our part-time base maybe. That may change as the rules for part-time employees seem to be a moving target today.
Other questions? Councilman Karski?
Thank you. I'm looking at, if we build this, we're going to be freeing up a lot of current storage space, both in the Courthouse Museum, the Pettigrew Home and Museum, and obviously not having to pay rent for Oscar storage. What are the plans? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, about 8,000 square feet is lost space. The structural engineer is basically telling us that there should be nothing stored in the attic of the old Courthouse Museum. And so that space we're using today that we're really not planning on reclaiming. There are some other spaces that we hope to repurpose. For instance, our exhibits office is in a corner of the first floor. We're hoping to be able to relocate that and get some additional exhibition space added into the building. A lot of the other space is in the basement, which is a basement, and it's a wet basement from time to time. So we're really not hoping to put a lot of other things back into it.
If I could, one more.
Certainly.
When I heard the information about the attic, concerns me. I mean, there's a real risk of a collapse of our roof there, isn't there?
Well, the old Courthouse Museum is our biggest artifact, and we're concerned about the structure. In 2004, the structural engineer found some issues with the roof. That was addressed by the county, and there were some structural repairs. In fact, the 2010 survey was to make sure that everything was still doing what it's supposed to be and that there was no further deterioration in the structure. And we have an additional survey planned for next year, just to make sure that we're monitoring it constantly to make sure that we're not having a problem. But yes, the weight there exceeds what is recommended by structural engineers. And we've had 2 reports by 2 different structural engineers just to make sure one's not going one way and another, anyway.
Other questions? Commissioner Barth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess that mine is more of a comment. You know, as a member of the museum board, I know that we currently are finding a hard time to find room for things. We're deaccessioning things, I don't know how to pronounce that, but we're having to get rid of things in order to find room for additional items. The fact is our community, our region is creating artifacts at an incredible rate, and we are, at some point have to make decisions which ones are we going to keep. You know, if there's 13 goblets at the Last Supper, which 3 can we keep? I don't know. We should maybe, you know, if we have the 2 knives that killed Julius Caesar, which one are we going to put in the collection and which one are we going to get rid of? We don't know for sure which items 200 years from now, 50 years from now, will be considered the most vital from our period in history. And I find it regrettable that we are running out of room to store new contributions.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Jameson.
Thank you. Last time we covered this topic, I had made it clear that I didn't appreciate the need for this, and I've come to appreciate the need now. The committee's work has achieved that. Where I struggle, though, is with the how and where. And the where, the value and the gift from the Hall family is enormous, but the location out there just strikes me as a little out of sync with the rest of the city's operations and the rest of all of our other buildings and things. So I'm struggling there with the where, and then the how. You know, on the council, certainly we've done our fair share of kicking the can down the road as often as we could because we really didn't want to address it, or we didn't know all these things, or for lots of reasons. But that's where I'm at. I appreciate the committee's work, but now for me the next hurdles are where and how we pay for this. I don't believe that it's, and maybe there's a recommendation from the committee about a timeline. Is there a recommendation by?
I might, Mr. Chair.
Councilor, excuse me, Urbanbach.
If I might, just there isn't a timeline. The goal right now is to make it part of the city budget. I understand the county has figured out how to pay their share in terms of making payments and that sort of thing. There isn't a timeline. The question, though, then becomes if we're going to question where and how, we're going to question then cost again, because we're talking about a significant chunk of the cost being paid for by selling a portion of that donated land. And we're talking about the fact that if we don't accept that donation, if we change it in any way, the deed then has different requirements for what the building would be. It changes the game completely. And so I kind of look at it as we've been given a box. We got to live inside this box, and this is the best way to live inside this box that we've been given. Maybe it's not exactly the perfect location, but it is the location that we've been given. And as you said, Councilor Jameson, it's an incredibly generous gift. The Hall family has been more than generous with the museum. And Kari Hall spends hours and hours a week up there. She loves it. She's passionate about it. And she's given this gift to us, and I think it's time for us to accept it and to move forward with it.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Way over here in the corner, sorry. I think my understanding is that the public won't be viewing this building, so maybe the position of wherever the location of this doesn't really matter because it's not really part of our campus. And correct me if I'm wrong, because there isn't going to be any public viewing. This is strictly a storage area for staff.
If I
Councilor Urbanbach.
Just, and again, Commissioner Barth can help with this as well, or staff, but it would be a public building because some of the genealogy work would be happening there, but it would not be a museum. Folks would not be going in there to view the items. They're going to be on shelves and in racks. But if you're doing genealogy work or some of that research, yes, you would go there. But that's then that work area. when you look at the 1,000 square feet that they have for work area now, that includes their offices and when the public comes in to do research. When we took the mayor on a tour the other day, and when we were in that work area, they had, was it a wedding dress bill that was all laid out from the 1890s? It was beautiful, but it's in their office. Someone was coming in to see it because it was grandma's dress. Well, it's right there in their office. So the logistics of working through that are really difficult. And so that's part of it is, yes, there is public access, but it's really limited. Doesn't matter where it is. You know, folks are going to know that that's where they're going to see whatever. So.
Any other questions, comments? Any action to be taken? Please identify yourself.
Dave Bixler, council staff.
I think you'll have to give us to that again.
Dave Bixler, council staff.
Thank you.
The one thing I want to bring up about the land is that it's not in a floodplain, and that was a big concern, that the collection wouldn't be exposed to any problems like that.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments?
There are people from the public here. Do we take public comment at these meetings?
We certainly could, I suppose. Anybody in the audience would like to make a public comment? And if there's somebody who has a spokesperson, it would be great to have one person do it rather than all of you. Since Diane said it was going to be short. Excuse me.
Bill Hoskins, Director of the Siouxland Heritage Museums. I just want to take a second to recognize some of the people who have come here today. I've got current members of the museum board, members of the Museums Alliance. They are supporters. We have former board members who are very interested in this, members of the public. The Siouxland Heritage Museums are the custodian of our community's cultural heritage. And two of our biggest artifacts are the Old Courthouse Museum and the Pettigrew Home and Museum. One of the things we're really trying to do is preserve our collection for the future. And part of that's preserving the Old Courthouse and the Pettigrew. And the Pettigrew is mostly public. It's viewed by the public. The Old Courthouse, really you're only seeing about a third of the available space. And I've told people this, but I can't describe what it's like. You almost have to see it to believe it. And if you haven't been on a tour, I'll set it up for you anytime, and you can come and look at what we do with your own eyes and make your own decisions. But I really would encourage you to come and take a look at it, because it's indescribable. Anyway.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments from the audience?
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Julie Risty, the Minnehaha County Register of Deeds. And I just wanted to add, I've been on the committee concerning the museum for a number of years, as well as being on the museum board, and I'm on the Alliance board. And what comes to mind, not to reiterate what everyone else has said, but this is a very heritagely rich community. And what we need to preserve is imperative, I think, to all of us. Looking back at the past, seeing where we began, and knowing where we're going, I think is extremely important. And those things that we have, I think we need to be able to protect, not only for ourselves, but for our children. And I think that this facility is something that Minnehaha County and Sioux Falls can really grow with, learn with, and certainly benefit from for generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Any other comments from the audience? Any other questions? Councilor Karski.
I'm not too sure who can answer this for me, but I guess I'd like the numbers broken down for me a little bit. Our construction costs are $3,858,000 and change. We're talking about the sale of some land, so I imagine that's going to reduce or be applied to that construction cost. We've done $1,750,000 in site work when we did the football fields. I imagine that would have been on top of that $3.8 million. What kind of number are we looking for here?
I can answer this. Bill, I'll go ahead and take that if you don't mind. Our total construction cost right now is $3.8 million. The split is a third, a third, and a third. So the cities would be a third of that. It's about $1.3 million. The county would be $1.3 million. And the private funding then, the bulk of it is from the sale of that land. And we're still, Councilor Rolfing and I were just talking about that. We're at a point where we're still deciding how much of that land will be sold, but the bulk of that land will be sold. That's the bulk of the private money that pays that third. So it becomes truly a public-private partnership when we go in that manner. Then I'd remind council that the CIP a couple of years down the road already has $390,000 in it. So we're looking at, from the city side, about $1 million would be our share of this agreement for construction.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? I don't believe we can take any action on this evening, my understanding. So we will defer it for probably budget time as far as the county goes. And the city, I'm not sure what your process will be. The other thing that was brought to my attention, Commissioner Barth did not change our agenda, but he would like to add one item. I don't know if that's permissible or not. It's in reference to the Lewis and Clark project. Anybody have any objections of him making a statement? It was unanimously approved, Commissioner Barth.
Oh, blank check. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was thinking I would bring it up under new business. I wasn't sure exactly where we would go, but the other night, Commissioner Jameson, Staggers, and I were at the annual dinner for the Lewis and Clark pipeline, which this project has been going on for 23 years. Funding is abysmal. This morning at the county commission meeting, we determined to send a letter to our federal legislators and our national chief executive encouraging continued support of this project. And I guess I would urge my friends on the city council and the mayor to follow us and encourage more funding for it. 208 years ago, Lewis and Clark came through this area, and at current funding levels, we won't finish this project for another 208 years. So let's see if we can get her done sooner. Thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Commissioner Barth, who would that letter go to?
I was thinking it would go to our federal legislators and President Obama. So it would be Senators Johnson, Thune, and Representative Kristi Noem.
If I could share, I was at that meeting as well, as Mr. Barth said, and there wasn't one federal officer who had a representative there who did not appreciate the value of that project or its efforts. There was only one person that was all fingers pointed at, and that was the President of the United States. Everyone referred to him and his authority and power to fund this project and his lack of funding. And I would urge that this body write a letter to the President of the United States and not to our federal elected officials, because they are carrying water for us. So I just want to clarify that, if I could.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, I would entertain a motion from the county to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Heiberger.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. From the city side?
So moved, Erpenbach.
Second, Entenmann.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Roll call vote, please.
We can do voice.
Oh, you don't have to do that anymore. Boy, I missed that process in my life. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Good job. Meeting's adjourned.